my name is Mark Armitage. I'm one of the careers consultants at the University of Exeter, and I work a lot with subjects like law, modern languages and some of the other humanities areas particularly. In many ways I think a lot of employers are looking for the generic skills, because in some ways it's more difficult to teach those, if you haven't got teamwork skills or good communication skills to start with. But at the same time, I think there's an assumption amongst employers that because people have been to university, they do have good IT and digital skills, and that's not always the case. I think sometimes when people do get into the workplace, it is quite hard for them, and they are, to use the cliche, on a bit of a steep learning curve in terms of having to learn the systems of that employer quite quickly. And I think a lot of students tend to use IT as much as they need to use it, rather like, I might use a mobile phone and I can phone people up, but I wouldn't necessarily use all the functions on it and understand it all. And I think it's a bit like that with student IT skills. They're using the IT skills they need, to get by in the workplace, and with their studies. And they like the technology in terms of their social life and the contacts it gives them, and also I think they are using it for networking. But at the same time, they wouldn't go beyond that. They wouldn't normally seek out extra IT skills if they didn't feel they needed them, and that's where they may fall down a bit in the workplace when they get there. Sometimes it's almost just an issue of having the latest technology. The university does support that with things like laptop clinics, but at the same time, there's always this assumption that everybody has the latest equipment and that it's all working okay, and that's not always the case. Yeah. And also we do sometimes have issues with employers. For example, I've come across some employers who are not just doing a telephone interview, they now want to do a Skype type interview. And that's quite a difficult thing for a student to set up. And I think the assumption from the employer that a student will have both the technical knowledge and the equipment to do a Skype interview is a little bit presumptuous, actually, a little bit unfair on some of the students. But at the same time, it does emphasise the need to sometimes broaden their IT base so that if some sort of IT demand comes along, they can quickly get up to speed with it. Mm-hmm. Mm. Telephone interviews have been around a while, and because they're relatively cheap compared, and similarly with the Skype follows the same principle of being cheap. But at the same time, I think most employers would be quite reasonable about it. They wouldn't, necessarily expect people to have that sort of technology at their fingertips. And also, you need peace and quiet to do that type of interview. It's difficult enough on a phone. A lot of students don't have a landline in a quiet place to do a telephone interview. We try and train people in interview skills, including role-playing and things like the interview experience. But, in a way when you're, talking to cameras, certain, particularly on a Skype, the sorts of body language or little things like sort of, maybe sort of fiddling with jewellery or something like that can be really exaggerated on a camera. So I think there could be, if it really takes off this Skype interview, there's almost scope for training people on how to interact in front of a camera and a microphone, perhaps. Yeah. We've always talked about networking as being an important tool in terms of not just getting a job because you know somebody, but really researching and beginning to understand, what a job's all about, and maybe that leading to some sort of internship or at least a short work placement so that they can see at first hand what it's about. So networking has always been important, but of course with the rise of IT and particularly sites like LinkedIn, it's increasingly important to use IT and social media as part of that networking process. And particularly we advise students to particularly obviously use the alumni network at Exeter because that's a great source of networking and support. And the various things on offer there, but in particular using LinkedIn and networking creatively and positively, is obviously to be encouraged. With our employability website, they'll give you a huge range of links, particularly say if you're looking at something like a less obvious area like, I don't know, not-for-profit or publishing, whereas things like law and finance are very well publicised. So again, the networking thing of actually meeting and talk to people in these areas, particularly if they've come to it recently, talking with them about how they got into it, getting tips, getting insights, and possibly because they've shown a real enthusiasm and commitment, that can often lead to them, maybe being introduced to a site. It may be that there's some sort of professional body they have to be a member of, though, to access certain sites. They may have to have passed certain exams or be in a certain profession. But obviously, if they're aware of that and the issues surrounding that, that can only help as well. I think the main point is to encourage all students to move outside their comfort zone a bit, particularly in the IT and technology field. So not just work with familiar areas of IT, but to be a bit more adventurous with it, and look at other areas they're less comfortable with, because that may well help them in the long run, and also show that they can sort of learn quickly and demonstrate the skills employers need.